Welcome to my late hour Q&A show. In these shows, you can ask me your questions on anything, technical or non-technical topics. And if I see the topic interesting and valuable to others, I will include your question in my next show. So tonight's show is about junior versus senior developers. One of my good students, Kyle from Melbourne, has sent me this question. What is the difference between a junior and a senior developer? So briefly, Kyle has 3 years of programming experience, including a year and a half of university study. He has told me that in most interviews he has attended, employers think that he's a junior developer. But when he got his current job, he demoed his previous work to his colleagues, and they thought he has implemented quite a few advanced features. So Kyle is wondering what he should focus on to become a real senior developer. And here's my response. Hi Kyle, thanks for sending me your question. I should say that this is actually a pretty interesting question, and I'm going to get into a lot of details in my response. First of all, there are two ways to define what makes a developer junior or senior. Job agencies have their own criteria, which is often based on the number of years of experience. Of course, they have other criteria based on your skill set, but they put a lot of weight on the number of years. Now, in my personal opinion, years of experience is not always a good way to assess if a given candidate is a senior developer or not. I've worked with developers with more than 10 years of experience who were at the intermediate level at best. Software industry, as you probably know, is very fast-pacing. And if you don't constantly learn new things fast, sooner or later, you'll be behind the game. I've seen developers with 20 years of experience who are still using Microsoft Access. So does 20 years of experience make such a developer a senior developer? Not really. So I personally believe being a senior developer depends on the skills, not the years of experience. And the skill set is subjective. You ask 10 different senior developers what are the skills that a senior developer should have, and chances are you will hear different answers. But if you're interested to know my answer, I would say a senior developer has experience with a wide range of technologies, often both on the front end and the back end. They have reasonable understanding of design patterns, or at least they know the key ones. So if someone says abstract factory or builder pattern, they know what they're talking about. They're exposed to NoSQL databases, but not necessarily an expert in the area. They're familiar with messaging tools and frameworks, but again, not necessarily an expert. They're able to troubleshoot problems often faster than junior developers, but not necessarily fast. They can think of different solutions to solve a problem, and they can explain the pros and cons of each solution from different points of view, such as performance, scalability, security, maintainability, and so on. They often write cleaner and more maintainable code. They should be able to write unit tests for their code, whether before the production code, which we call test-driven development or TDD, or after. These are my personal criteria to tell if someone is a junior or senior developer, but I think these are fair assumptions. And if you ask 10 senior developers, most of them are going to agree with most of the criteria I've listed here. No one is going to say, no, a senior developer doesn't need to know unit testing. No one is going to say a senior developer doesn't have to write clean code. Now, having said that, I've worked with senior consultants who fail at ticking these boxes. And it really surprises me how they end up getting those titles. But that aside, to answer your question, what you should do to become a senior developer, I would say there are two parts here. One part is the number of years which you get judged upon, and that's really out of your control, so don't worry about it. Instead, focus on what is under your control, and that's the skill set I talked about. So, improve your coding skills, learn to write cleaner and more maintainable code, because I don't think anyone would regard a developer who writes messy code as a senior developer, no matter how many years of experience they have. If you're interested, I have a course on Udemy called Clean Code. Look at the table of content and see if you know all the topics I have covered. If not, I would suggest that should be your starting point. Also, spend some time studying and practicing unit testing. That would certainly take you to the next level. And on the side, get yourself exposed to a wide range of front-end and back-end tools and frameworks. If you want to be a full-stack developer on the client, make sure you're pretty confident with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, and Bootstrap. And I mean really, really confident, because this is the absolute minimum. You should also be pretty confident in one of the leading front-end frameworks like Angular or React. On the backend, if you want to use Microsoft technologies, you should be pretty confident with ASP.NET MVC, Web API, Entity Framework, and Relational Database at an absolute minimum. You should also be pretty confident writing most queries in plain SQL to get data out of your database. Now, on top of all this, if I want to give you a golden key, I would say go and build 3 different applications end to end entirely by yourself. Pick any kind of domain you're interested in and build a real world application. If you don't have any ideas, look at the applications around you. Any website you visit, any apps you use, think of building a simplified version of that application. When you build an application end to end by yourself, you will have a far deeper understanding of all these technologies and various challenges of putting them together along the way. When you join a team, most of the time, there is some legacy code sitting there, and there's a lot of magic happening in that code that you have no idea about. Most of the time, you'll be working on little bits and pieces here and there, and to be frank with you, this stuff wouldn't really give you the depth that you need as a senior developer. You will just learn how to maintain existing applications, and this is not something to be proud of. So in your spare time, build an application end to end and deploy it to Azure. Yes, you would have to pay a little bit of money for your subscription, but trust me, that's not much, and you can turn off the service shortly after deployment, so you wouldn't have to pay any more money. When you go through all these different phases of software development lifecycle, starting from the requirements and eventually deploying working software, you would be a completely different developer. So to recap, on the client, make sure you're pretty confident with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, Bootstrap, and at least one of the leading frameworks like Angular or React. On the server, if you're going to use Microsoft technologies, make sure you're pretty confident with ASP.NET MVC, Web API, Entity Framework, and relational databases. On top of all this, you should write really clean code, you should know your unit testing, you should know your design patterns, then I would say you're a senior developer. Now, just one thing, since you're new to the industry, you may get intimidated by different kinds of things you need to know. But trust me, it's not that hard. When you build a real-world application end-to-end, you will deal with these technologies all the time. And after a while, they become like a piece of cake. So, I hope I've answered your question, and I wish you all the best.